Hi everyone, good day. I'm Dr. Sipache Basit, the Dean of the School of Medical Technology in Emilio Ginaldo College, Cavite Campus, and welcome to another lecture here in Microbiology and Parasitology. And for today, we'll talk about the viral infections of humans. As we all know, viral infections are actually one of the most timely topics nowadays, especially that we're having pandemic with a certain viral infection. So, for today's lesson, we shall be discussing the introduction, of course, what are the viruses, and then we'll be able to divide the discussion on the different systemic diseases of the viruses, okay, of different systemic diseases of the viral infections for that matter. Okay, so first of all, what are viruses? Viruses are obligate intracellular parasites, meaning to say they cannot actually survive outside the host cells. So it says here in the first bullet that viruses multiply within host cells. Okay, so viruses would actually use the genetic machinery of the host. So without the host cells, viruses will not be able to multiply. That's the reason why, as in cases of coronavirus, for example, social distancing is very important, because once the viruses got out of your system, if it doesn't reach any host at all, it will just fall down to the ground, and within days, these viruses will be dead. Okay? So they need hosts in order for them to survive. So it is during their escape from those cells, so they escape the host cells either by cell lysis. So when you say cell lysis, it means that they will destroy the cell as they escape, or budding. So when you say budding, they will utilize the cell membrane of the host cells so that it will become their envelope. Okay? So either during cell lysis or budding, so the host cells are actually destroyed. So these cell destructions lead to most of the symptoms of viral infections, which vary depending on the location of the infection. Okay, so our first, of course, topic would be viral infections of the skin. By the way, viruses are even smaller than bacteria. Okay, so that's the reason why they are called filterable agents. Okay, so viruses are filterable agents. They are much smaller than bacteria, and the reason why we're calling them filterable agents because of the fact that they can actually pass through bacteriologic filter. They're too small that they are able to pass through bacteriologic filter. Okay, so important things to remember. First, they are obligate intracellular parasite, and then second, viruses are filterable agents. Okay, so for today, we'll be discussing different systemic viral infections. So let's start first with the skin. So skin, of course, you're very familiar with chicken pox and shingles. Are they related? Yes. Chicken pox is actually caused by varicella. Shingles is actually caused by varicella zoster. So they are DNA viruses. It is a DNA virus, and they belong, or it belongs to one of the largest viral DNA, one of the largest family of DNA viruses. Okay, so we call that the herpes viridae. Okay, so by the way, varicella zoster virus is also known as the herpes virus 3. So what I'm saying is that chickenpox and shingles are related. Why? Because chickenpox, at first, maybe perhaps you'd remember that you had chickenpox before as a child. So chickenpox is the initial infection. Okay, so in doing so, shingles are actually the latent infection of the chickenpox. So what will happen is that if in cases that you're not able to totally eliminate chickenpox virus, so some of these viruses would be hiding at the peripheral nerve fibers, and they will reoccur or reappear at let's say, for example, if the host becomes immunocompromised. So that's what you call latency or latent infection. So shingles are actually much painful than chickenpox because shingles actually reside at the peripheral nerve endings, which is of course our pain receptor. Okay, German measles. This is a rubella. So it's a rubella virus, an example of RNA virus. So take note that rubella is characterized by rashes. So that particular rashes is called exanthem. So take note, if the rashes are found outside, such as in the skin, we call that exanthem. But if the rashes are found in the mucous membrane, which could also happen in cases of German measles, we call it the enanthem. Okay. And German measles are different from measles or hard measles or rubiola as far as the etiologic agent is concerned. So, measles is caused by a rubiola virus, which is of course also an RNA virus. And then we also have the monkeypox, it's a DNA virus, and then the smallpox. Smallpox is a misnomer because the P-O-C-K, pock lesion is not really that small. Fortunately, smallpox, we were able to eradicate smallpox virus. Okay, so there are two strains of smallpox viruses. Okay, so these are the variola minor and the other one is variola major, and both of them are said to be DNA viruses. And then we have warts. Okay, there are at least 70 different types of human papilloma viruses. Okay, and it is also a DNA virus. So take note that human papilloma virus, some of them are said to be oncogenic. So when you say oncogenic, it means that they are capable of causing cancer. So this is an example of the chickenpox. So maybe some of you had actually experienced getting this one. And this is the rubella. So again, when you say rubella, it's a German measles. So rashes found in the skin, we call that the exanthem. Okay, so another example of a child with measles. Unfortunately, we had a resurgence of measles cases about last year, probably because of the vaccine scare among parents. Okay. This is the Koplik spots, an early sign of measles. So what I'm telling you is that if the rashes are found in the mucous membrane, then we call it the enanthem. So monkeypox, so a child with a monkeypox. Okay, so smallpox is actually has actually a much larger population than that. Okay, and then let's talk about viral infections of the eyes. Okay, so there are several possible etiologic agents of eye infection. If you remember conjunctivitis, it can also be caused by bacteria. It can also be caused by viruses. So what's the difference between the bacterial conjunctivitis and viral conjunctivitis? Usually, bacterial conjunctivitis is characterized by more pus. So kapag mas maraming muta, it is most probably bacterial by nature. Unlike viral, mostly characterized by reddish, especially if it's a hemorrhagic type of conjunctivitis. Okay, so there are several examples of viral infections of the eyes. So let's say, for example, adenoviral conjunctivitis or keratoconjunctivitis. It is caused by various types of adenoviruses. The herpes simplex and the varicella zoster viruses can also cause keratoconjunctivitis. And then it is also there is also hemorrhagic conjunctivitis. It's caused by adenovirus and enteroviruses. So people with viral infections, let's say for example cold sore, or if you have herpes, for example, you should wash your hand thoroughly before inserting or removing contact lenses, or otherwise you might actually accidentally scratch your eyes or touch your eyes. So that's how you get herpes in the eyes. Okay, so that's what you call keratoconjunctivitis. And then we also have this one is the most common types of viral infections. Okay, it is the viral infections of the upper respiratory tract, the common cold viruses. There are more than 100 strains of common cold viruses or rhinoviruses. Okay, it's a major cause of colds among the adults. Okay, so other possible viruses that may cause colds: coronavirus, of course, para-influenza viruses, respiratory syncytial virus, influenza virus, adenoviruses, and enteroviruses. So, how do we get common colds? Okay, so the most common mode of transmission would be by means of respiratory secretions. So, by way of hands, fomites. So, when you say fomites, this refers to inanimated objects such as the doorknob or the handle of the grocery cart. Okay, direct contact or with inhalation of airborne droplets. Okay, so respiratory droplets, which means that whenever I speak right now, I'm actually transmitting microscopic respiratory droplets. Okay, and there are also viral infections of the lower respiratory tract. So they might cause acute febrile. So when you say febrile, it is characterized by the presence of fever, viral respiratory diseases. Again, this may be caused by para-influenza viruses, respiratory syncytial virus, adenovirus, rhinoviruses, and certain type of coronaviruses, Coxsackie viruses, and echoviruses. So, the transmission occurs via direct oral contact or by droplets. Okay, now avian flu or the bird flu is caused by the influenza virus. Okay, so the letter H there refers to the envelope of the virus, which actually is hemagglutinin. Okay, so H1N1. So for example, the N refers to the neuraminidase. Okay, so avian flu is actually a bird in origin. So which means that the primary host is bird, but there is a possible bird-to-human transmission because, of course, some of these viruses has actually mutated and was able to adapt to humans as hosts. And humans usually get infected, especially when they come into contact with infected poultry or contaminated surfaces. And then, we also have the hantavirus pulmonary syndrome. It is caused by at least 5 different types of hantaviruses. So we have the sin nombre, the Bayou, Black Creek Canal, New York 1, and Monongahela. Okay. So the transmission occurs by inhalation of aerosolized rodent feces. So rodent apparently becomes the reservoir of the virus, urine, and saliva. And then, of course, the influenza virus, the one that causes pandemic, okay, sometime in 1918. So if you notice, most of the viruses that causes pandemic are actually capable of causing the lower respiratory tract infection. So this includes the influenza virus. The one that causes pandemic in 1918 was the H1N1. Again, H refers to hemagglutinin and refers to neuraminidase. Okay, so transmission is via infected humans, pigs, birds, and other reservoir. So respiratory droplets, that's why wearing of mask is very important. And then we also have SARS, severe acute respiratory syndrome. So in 2003, it was SARS-CoV-1, and now the one that causes COVID-19, coronavirus disease 19, that's the SARS-CoV-2. The severe acute respiratory syndrome, coronavirus 2. Okay? And the disease is known as the COVID-19. So the transmission occurs via infected individuals by respiratory droplets or by touching the mouth, nose, or eye, or after touching contaminated surface or object. That is the reason why if you do not want to get COVID-19, it is very important to have, number one, you have to wear masks, you have to wear protection, you need to protect your mucus, your eyes, you need to protect your mouth, your nose. So whenever you have to wear mask, you have to wear it properly, because I've seen people who are wearing masks yet expose yung ilong. That's wrong. And then it is also important that you have a shield that protects your eyes, because your mask will only protect your nose, your mouth, but it will not protect your eyes. And respiratory droplets may also enter via eyes. Imagine if someone sneezes, directly in your face. So you'll not be able to see microscopic droplets that may contain viruses, and they may actually get into your eyes. So that's why goggles, face shields are very important. Okay? And sometimes whenever you are wearing masks, unconsciously or consciously, you might actually scratch your face, rub your eyes, without you knowing it, especially if it's, of course, you are doing it unconsciously. That is the reason why hand washing is very important. Remember that coronaviruses are envelope viruses, and envelope viruses are easily killed by at least 70% alcohol. Never use 40% alcohol. It may not be effective at all. And then Clorox is also very effective. All you have to do is to dilute Clorox with 90% water. Using pure Clorox not really good. You need at least water so that Clorox will be converted to hypochlorous acid, and hypochlorous acid has an antimicrobial properties. Okay, cold sores. Cold sores are actually known as the fever blisters or herpes labialis. Okay, herpes labialis here, because cold sore may appear here. It is usually caused by herpes simplex virus type 1. Okay, or may also be caused by HSV2. But most of the time, HSV2 is sexually transmitted. Okay. However, if the patient has been involved in oral sex, so he or she might get HSV2 in the oral cavity. So again, it is a DNA virus that belongs to herpes viridae family. So either the type 1 or the type 2 can also infect the genital tract. Although, as what I told you before, type 2 is the most common etiology of genitalia infection. Okay, now remember, once you have herpes, you'll always have it forever. You'll never be able to cure it. There's no cure for herpes. Yes, you can use acyclovir. Acyclovir will only relieve you of the symptoms, meaning mawawala lang symptoms, but the virus will always have latency at the peripheral nerve fibers. They will just hide there and ready to reappear whenever your immune system becomes compromised. So once you have herpes, you'll have it forever. May forever sa herpes. Yan. So this is an example of herpes labialis in the mouth. Okay. And then of course, viruses may also infect the gastrointestinal tract, causing viral enteritis and viral diarrhea. So the most common viruses infecting children, particularly in the first year of life, are enteric adenoviruses, astroviruses, caliciviruses, and rotaviruses. So that's the reason why we have vaccines for rotavirus, but especially for neonates. Viruses infecting children and adults would include the norovirus-like viruses and then the rotaviruses. So how do we get viral infection of the gastrointestinal tract? So the most common route of transmission would be by fecal-oral route, meaning to say, we might accidentally ingest or drink something that is fecally contaminated, or possibly also by drinking contaminated water, and some shellfish products may actually contain viruses. So, meaning viruses entered via vehicle. So when I say vehicle, this may refer to food and water. Okay, so there are also viruses that may cause hepatitis. Yan. So remember that actually there are 6, if I'm not mistaken, types of hepatitis virus. So let's talk about type A. Type A is also known as the hepatitis A virus infection. It is known as the infectious hepatitis or the epidemic hepatitis. So the etiologic agent is a linear single-stranded RNA virus, and the mode of transmission is fecal-oral route, meaning if you drink contaminated water or eat contaminated food, there's a chance that you might get hepatitis A. Okay? So hepatitis B or the hepatitis B infection is caused by serum hepatitis or hepatitis B virus. Unlike hepatitis A, which is an RNA virus, hepatitis B is actually a DNA virus, a circular double-stranded DNA virus. So the mode of transmission of hepatitis B is different from that of hepatitis A, because in A, the mode of transmission is fecal-oral transmission. For B, you can get it by sexual contact, because hepatitis B is found in body fluids. Okay, household contact with an infected person, injected drug use, tattooing, needle stick. It was not written here. Blood transfusion. Okay, that's how you get hepatitis B. Hepatitis B is transmitted the same way as HIV. And then hepatitis C is also known as the hepatitis C virus infection, also known as the non-A, non-B hepatitis, and there's another name for hepatitis C, and that is a post-transfusion hepatitis. So, it is caused by an RNA virus, particularly a linear single-stranded RNA virus, also an envelope virus. And if you will look at the mode of transmission of hepatitis C, it is almost the same as hepatitis B, primarily parenterally transmitted, but rarely sexual. So meaning, it is known as the post-transfusion hepatitis because blood transfusion, before kasi they're just screening for Hepa B, but nowadays they are now already screening for Hepa C because at that time, particularly during the 80s, they haven't discovered hepatitis C yet. So screening of blood donors for hepatitis C at that time was not very popular. So many of the recipients of blood, okay, who were unscreened for hepatitis C got hepatitis C. That's the name post-transfusion hepatitis. Okay, and then we also have the type D hepatitis, also known as the hepatitis D infection or the delta hepatitis. Okay, hepatitis D is a delta virus, an envelope circular single-stranded RNA viral satellite. And one of the most important characteristics of hepatitis D is that co-infection with hepatitis B is necessary. Meaning to say, if you're able to immunize yourselves against hepatitis B, you'll also be protected against hepatitis D. Because without hepatitis B virus infection, you will not get hepatitis D infection. So, the mode of transmission of hepatitis D is almost the same as hepatitis B, and that is exposure to infected blood and body fluid. So, and it wasn't mentioned here, it is mentioned here, we also have the type E hepatitis. Type E is the waterborne hepatitis. So, it is a non-envelope, single-stranded RNA virus, and the mode of transmission would be by fecal-oral transmission, primarily fecally contaminated drinking water. Person-to-person infection may also be possible. So, remember, type E hepatitis is the waterborne hepatitis. And the last virus, the latest among them, is the hepatitis G virus, a linear single-stranded RNA virus, and it is transmitted parenterally, which means it's almost the same as hepatitis B. Okay, so these are the common viruses that causes hepatitis, that may cause hepatitis. So remember, in hepatitis, characterized by, of course, inflammation of the liver, you'll see that the skin of the patient is jaundice. There's jaundice. So when you say jaundice, there is a yellow discoloration of the skin and sclera. And in clinical chemistry, you would notice that bilirubin is increased, and then there are also liver enzymes that may increase. So what are the liver enzymes? So this includes your alkaline phosphatase, SGPT, SGOT, lactate dehydrogenase, gamma glutamyl transferase. So these are examples of liver enzymes that might possibly increase in cases of viral hepatitis. Okay, so let's talk about the sexually transmitted diseases. Okay, many viruses may cause sexually transmitted infection. Okay, let's discuss them one by one. Again, you remember about herpes? So what I told you is that the most common cause of anogenital herpes is the type 2, occasionally by type 1, because most of the time type 1 is in the labi, here in the mouth or oral cavity. However, if the person is involved in oral genital, oral anal, anal genital, or direct sexual contact, whenever there is a lesion, then bingo, there's now herpes viral infection. Now take note, using condom may minimize the chances of you getting herpes, but it will not totally prevent you from getting one, particularly if the lesion is not covered, okay, by the rubber of the condom. So there's a chance that you might still get herpes. And then of course, genital warts. Genital warts are also known as genital papillomatosis, and the other one is condyloma acuminatum. Okay, so it is caused by human papilloma viruses or HPV. It is a DNA virus. The transmission occurs via infected humans by direct contact, and it is usually sexual. So genital warts can become malignant. So take note, type 16 and type 18 may cause cancer of the cervix. And fortunately, there is already a vaccine available against genital warts. So there's already a vaccine that may prevent you from getting penile cancer, cervix cancer, or anal cancer. Okay, so there you have it, the lesion of the herpes found in the shaft of the penis. Okay, and then we also have viral infections of the circulatory system. We have of course the HIV. HIV may cause AIDS, or the acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, and there are type 1 and type 2. So type 2 is usually found in sub-Saharan desert in Africa, and type 1 is more common. Okay, so the transmission occurs via infected humans by direct sexual contact, contaminated needles or syringes, transfusion of contaminated blood, transplacental transfer from mother to child, transplantation of HIV-infected tissues or organ, needle sticks, scalpel, and broken glass injuries. So if you notice, there are many ways in which you can get HIV. But according to the data provided by DOH here in the Philippines, or even in other parts of the world or all over the world, the most common mode of transmission of HIV is MSM, men having sex with men. Okay? So MSM, unprotected sexual intercourse, is the most common type of infection caused by HIV. Okay, so I think I did mention this: sexual contact. This one is MSM, transfusion, contaminated needle, perinatal transmission, transplacental during delivery, infected birth canal, or as a result of breast milk carrying the virus. Okay, so is HIV different from AIDS? Yes. AIDS is actually a terminal disease of HIV. So once the virus has entered your body, it is not yet the AIDS per se. Because when you say AIDS, that refers to the acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. But the target cell of the HIV is the CD4 or the T helper cell. So normally we have about 800 to 1,000 T helper cells or CD4. So 800 to 1,000 cells per cubic millimeter. Okay. So the virus will only attack the T helper cells because they have these certain receptor sites that will allow the virus to penetrate. Okay? So they will attack the T helper cell. What is the importance of T helper cell? T helper cell is important in both cell-mediated immunity and humoral immunity. Meaning to say, it is important for immune system. So, what will happen is that if the CD4 level in your body falls below 200 cells per cubic millimeter, that is already the stage of clinical AIDS. So, people do not die of HIV per se, but they die of the opportunistic infections and malignancy during clinical AIDS stage. So take note that you'll have clinical AIDS if your CD4 level falls below 200 cells per cubic millimeter. So, what are the most common types of malignancy? You might probably get Kaposi sarcoma, oral hairy leukoplakia, but the most common is the Kaposi sarcoma. Kaposi sarcoma is also a viral infection, human herpes virus number 8. And then, the most common opportunistic infections, of course, candidiasis. So, you'll have thrush, THRUSH, meaning there is a whitish patch in the mucous membrane of your mouth and even in your tongue. And then eventually candidiasis becomes systemic. Pneumocystis jirovecii is another example of opportunistic infections. So opportunistic infections happen during clinical AIDS, and people die of clinical AIDS. People die of opportunistic infection and malignancy during clinical AIDS, not against HIV virus. Is there a cure? No cure, but there is a treatment. Okay, cure is different from treatment. So usually, people are being given antiretroviral drugs. Okay, it's a cocktail. So you say cocktail is a concoction or combination of different anti-HIV, antiretroviral drugs that you need to drink. Okay, once you get infected, and you can actually get it for free. I'm not sure if it's for free. Okay, so all you have to do is you have to visit the treatment hub and enroll yourself in that particular treatment hub. Okay, so can you survive longer than 10 years? Yes, Magic Johnson got it in the late 80s. Until now, he's still alive. Because of course he's been drinking these antiretroviral drugs. Okay, so if you have if you've been faithfully drinking these antiretroviral drugs, HIV could become non-detectable, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you are totally cured from HIV. So HIV is an example of pandemic disease because it is present worldwide. Okay? So other viral infections of the circulatory systems include infectious mononucleosis. This one is caused by Epstein-Barr virus, human herpes virus 4. It is a DNA virus. It is also known as the mono or the kissing disease. And the reason why we call it kissing disease is because of the possible transmission by direct contact via saliva. Okay, person-to-person contact. Okay? And then we also have the mumps, beke in Tagalog. Okay? It is caused, mumps is also known as infectious parotitis. So it is caused by the mumps virus, another example of RNA virus that belongs to the measles family. Okay, so transmission occurs via infected humans by droplet spread and direct contact with saliva. Yeah, so an example of a child with mumps. And then we also have the viral hemorrhagic fevers. So when you say hemorrhagic fevers, whenever we get infected with these viruses, there would be uncontrolled bleeding. Okay? So there are many different types of viruses. Example is, of course, in the Philippines, the most common is dengue virus, dengue hemorrhagic fevers, and there are 4 types of dengue hemorrhagic fever. So what happens during dengue hemorrhagic fevers? The number of platelet becomes very low. We call that thrombocytopenia. Okay? And of course, yellow fever virus, Crimean Congo hemorrhagic virus, Lassa virus, Ebola virus, Marburg virus. Okay, so dengue virus, yellow fever virus is an example. These are examples of arboviruses. So when you say arbo, arthropod-borne, because let's say for example in cases of dengue, it is transmitted because of the mosquito bite. Okay, so Ebola and Marburg viruses are extremely large filamentous viruses. Infected human serves as the reservoir. Infected green monkey may also serve as the reservoir of the Marburg infection. So again, as you can see here, transmission is person to person via direct contact with infected blood, secretions, internal organ semen, also known as or needle stick. Okay, and then we also have the viral infections of the CNS. So we have the lymphocytic choriomeningitis. It is caused by the LCMV. Transmission occurs via exposure to mouse urine. So incidentally, mice are the reservoir of this infection. So mouse urine, dropping, saliva, or nesting materials. And then poliomyelitis. Polio, or the one that causes infantile paralysis. It is caused by polioviruses, an example of RNA virus. So the transmission is person to person, primarily via the oral fecal route, because poliovirus is actually an example of enterovirus, meaning to say they are found in our gastrointestinal tract. So throat secretions may also be the possible source of polio infection. Fortunately, we can prevent polio by means of Savin, it's oral drops, or by the other one is Salk vaccine injection. Rabies is another example of viral infection of the CNS. Okay, so nobody can survive rabies. Okay, it is caused by rhabdovirus. So when you say rhabdo, that's RHADBO, so rhabdovirus. So a bullet-shaped envelope RNA virus. And the most common reservoir are dogs. Of course, here in the Philippines, it's not every day that we'll encounter foxes, coyotes, wolves, jackals, skunks, raccoons, mongoose, and bucks. Cats may also have rabies. Okay? Transmission occurs via the bite of rabid animal, which will introduce virus-laden saliva. Airborne transmission from bats in caves may also occur. So do not just visit cave for no reason at all, okay? You know what? Once you are bitten by an animal suspected to have rabies, the first aid is not to get garlic. That's not true. The first aid is to wash the bite wound with soap and water. If you did that, you won half of the battle. Okay? And then of course you have to go to centers, to rabies center, dog bite center, so that you'll be able to receive anti-rabies. Okay? Once the virus entered the CNS, it is the point of no return. So some people are not actually receiving rabies, anti-rabies shot. So what's the consequence? Of course, anti-rabies is important so that you'll be able to neutralize the virus. The virus will usually ascend from the peripheral nerve fibers. It will ascend into your CNS. But once it has reached CNS, it is the point of no return and you'll not be able to survive that. So, before the virus enters the CNS, it is very important that you get anti-rabies shot. Okay? And then we also have the viral meningitis. It is also known as the aseptic meningitis or a bacterial meningitis, and there are various types of viruses that may cause viral meningitis. Okay? So remember about the Arbovirus that I told you a while ago. So these are the arthropod-borne virus or the Arbovirus. But of course, they're using US as the example because our book is US based. So it is not really common in our country. Who needs EEE, California encephalitis, La Crosse encephalitis, St. Louis encephalitis, West Nile virus encephalitis, West equine encephalitis if we have dengue? So we have enough trouble for dengue. So we do not need any of these viruses. But in case you'll be working in the United States, these are the possible viruses that you might actually encounter, especially if you will be working in the countryside. Okay, so we have Aedes also here in the Philippines. So Aedes, Culex, Coquillatibia culiceta. Okay, so you might want to study these types of viruses as well. Okay, so as a recap, you might want to screenshot this particular portion so that you have, of course, the table that will tell us what are the most common etiologic agent of many viral diseases. And of course, if you want to know more about the viruses that I have discussed, you might want to do additional readings or additional research. It may also be useful if you'll be googling the images of this viral infection, so that you'll have ideas about these viruses. Okay, so nowadays, of course, the most popular is the SARS-CoV-2, the causative agent of COVID-19. So there you have it. I hope you learn about the popular viral infections of humans. Of course, it's impossible for me to discuss everything. This is just an overview of the viral infections of humans. So, God bless everyone. Finals are actually fast approaching, so be sure that you'll study your lesson. God bless everyone. Stay safe.